were working for a private firm that provided training and related services to Qatar's armed forces. Qatari officials detained them last year in September along with the owner of the company that they were working in. The owner was released in 2 months, but the 8 former Indian officials continued to remain for many months even in solitary confinement. The central government has long maintained that it was exploring legal channels to ensure the release of the arrested personnel. Now that this death sentence has been announced, a decision that has shocked the Indian state, what is it that India can truly do to save these former 8 Navy officials' lives and provide them at least with the best possible defense? We'll take that question to our guest joining us in just a bit. But first, let me take you through the details about what these former Navy officials were doing in Qatar. So as I mentioned, these 8 personnel were working at a defense services provider company called Al Dara Global, and most of them were actually in leadership positions, not really low positions. The company is owned or was owned by an Omani national named Khamis Al Ajmi, who himself is a retired squadron leader of the Royal Oman Air Force. Now, according to the company's old website, Al Dara gave logistical, maintenance and training services to Qatari Emiri Naval Force. But there is no mention of that aspect or the ex-Indian Navy officials working for them in their new website. Al Dara's owner was also arrested, as I mentioned, in Qatar in September last year, when the gentleman actually went to Qatar from Oman to try and secure the release of his workers. But he was arrested as well, only to be released 2 months later in November 2022. Now that was not something that the Indian officials got. Right after the verdict was announced, the Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement. Let me take you through most of it. They've said they're deeply shocked by the verdict and death penalty of the ex-Indian Navy personnel. We will take this verdict up with Qatari authorities, is what the Indian MEA has said, that they are in touch with the family members of the arrested personnel and their legal teams, that India is exploring all legal options available. What those could be, I'll get to that in just a bit. But that MEA will continue to extend all consular and legal assistance to these individuals. They asserted that due to the confidential nature of the proceedings of the case, it would not be appropriate to make further comments. The Indian government and the ministry also being extremely careful. Let's take a look at the possible options that India has here, because mind you, this is a lower court ruling as it stands. It needs to be confirmed by the Constitutional Court, so it's not a final verdict by any means. The Indian agencies have the option of appealing against this verdict before a higher court in Qatar, possibly eventually even an international court. India is also likely to seek frequent consular access to the arrested personnel. India is also looking to extend more legal assistance to the family members on behalf of whom cases can be fought. And back channel diplomacy, this is where it will take center stage. What are the back channel diplomacy issues that we can take up along with legal aid that India can explore? And this is going to be perhaps where the most deft handling of this issue is going to be needed. Now, why do I say deft handling? Because while India and Qatar have a good relationship, this situation is very complex and there are many strains on this otherwise good relationship between the two countries. So let me remind you, Qatar was the first country to object to Nupur Sharma's statement made on a TV show. Remember, Nupur Sharma is the now suspended BJP spokesperson, and Qatar had raised that issue. Qatar had even demanded an apology on it, and India had issued an apology along with the suspension of Nupur Sharma. So that was the first strain more recently. Now, the jailing of the 8 ex-Navy personnel is also going to put more strain on this relationship, because this has effectively blindsided New Delhi. They have 8 lakh citizens in Qatar, and there is going to be a question mark on the safety of all of them. And all of this is also happening amidst difference of opinion over the ongoing Israel and Gaza war. Now, Qatar, no surprises, is sympathetic towards Palestine, while India has condemned Hamas actions and supported Israel's right to defend itself. Now, in all of that complexity, not just in the bilateral relationship, in the views on international events, but in an increasingly divided world, what is it that India can do? After this death penalty for the ex-Navy officers, what are the options available? What is that India can do to save them? That's a big debate coming up.
This particular incident, which has been taken up very seriously by the MEA, will probably put some dent on our bilateral ties with Qatar. We all are aware that the nature of our cooperation or the nature of our existing relationship with Qatar has been a little bit shaky because of certain developments that have taken place in the last couple of years.
Hello, Moto.
Let's go across to our experts joining us. Ashok Sajjanhar is former Indian diplomat. Professor Asif Ramiz Daudi is a Middle East expert. Amitabh Sinha, senior lawyer, is also joining us. And I'm also joined with Swasti Rao, associate fellow of the MPIDSA. Swasti, let me begin with you. While nobody will accept it in clear terms, but there is a suspicion that this recent Israel conflict and India's very open stance supporting Israel's right to defend itself against a terrorist organization like Hamas may have something to do with this very strict penalty, a death penalty that has been awarded to 8 ex-Indian Navy officials. Would you say there is credence to this?
Well, a very good evening to you, Shivani, and a good evening to all the other panelists as well. To your question, if this has anything to do with India's stand on the current crisis in West Asia, I think this is not how the world of diplomacy really works. I mean, I would not rule it out completely. I would say that if I were to prepare a list of reasons as to what may have happened, because let's also understand that the kind of the kind of situation that is there is also pertaining to a very top, very highly secretive, submarine program.
Yes.
And I go into the details because for sure I don't cover Qatar directly, but I cover Europe, and I know that the Italians have been there in Qatar, and the midget submarine program, which is a highly secretive submarine program, has been in the offing for many years now, and it's a multi-billion-dollar program. And also understand that Qatar was one of the first countries in the Gulf to actually start acquiring submarines, because UAE and Saudi Arabia don't really have submarines right now. So what I'm trying to tell you is that it is also the very nature of the program that we are discussing that is extremely secretive. Understand that submarines, these submarines, the midget submarines, are military submarines, not just any submarines, and they also come with stealth capabilities, right? So because of this entire nature, which is extremely enigmatic and mysterious, it also lends a further complication to what was happening. Now, that said, we right now do not know as to what really were the charges on these former 8 Navy officers, right? So, I would be very careful in saying that they are treated the way they are treated because of what is going on in the Middle East.
Okay. No, but the reason why I asked you this question is also precisely this. We don't really know the nature of the charges. I understand they are related to national security and top secret military programs, and of course any government would take that very seriously. But with a friendly nation, you would possibly expect a little bit more dissemination of information and some sort of greater access to their citizens, especially those who have been ex-armed officials. So given that we don't really know much, and clearly New Delhi was surprised and shocked by this verdict, does that lend you to believe that maybe this is some sort of shadow boxing taking place?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, it's very distasteful. I mean, I'm not at all disagreeing from the fact that it's extremely distasteful. And that is the reason behind India's official shock. Because, if you look into the details of how these 8 officers, they are not just anybody, they are retired officers who have served in the Navy for at least 20 years. They were also instructors. They were picked up from their dwellings in the dead of the night. So all these things also indicate at a very distasteful way, the entire thing has been carried out. So perhaps, somebody from the diplomatic services like Ambassador Sajjanhar would tell you the nitty-gritty of what diplomacy should be, what kind of diplomacy should be expected or should be responded with. But as a common citizen also, I mean, I'm extremely shocked at the way this entire thing has come. And then, considering that Qatar has been one of the top LNG suppliers to India recently. Yes. So, I mean, you don't really expect that. And in my opinion, I think that is something that we would take very, very seriously, regardless of whatever is happening in West Asia. But that is just not the way you would expect expect a modern state to behave with another friendly state. I mean, what is it, Canada number 2 or maybe worse than that? So this is something which is very, very bothersome, and I totally agree that we should really, rebut it in the strongest possible manner. Yeah.
Okay, let me also go across to Mr. Daudi. I want to understand from his perspective as well. How is he looking at it? Is there credence to the suspicion that this could have something to do with the Israel conflict as well? Or is this purely a military espionage, suspected spying activity matter, which the Qataris have taken very, very seriously? But in this case, as I said, they haven't really seemed to have kept their Indian counterparts in good stead or in proper light. So how do you read this situation, Professor Daudi?
Well, Shivani, what I have to say, there are speculations and different narratives. At the same time, there are perspectives. And everyone has his or her own rights to talk about that. I can't agree more with Dr. Swasti when she said that it has no connection with the, Israel and India's stand.
Okay.
When they say that India supports Israel and that's the reason they are going to do something of this sort. So there are many other aspects that one should understand. Before we comment on these sensitive and serious issues, when, the international communities, different countries, they are having a proper eyes on this. You know why? Because India has emerged as one of the world leaders, and we know that if you have you give these kinds of a verdict against 8 ex-naval officers in a different country, then the consequences could be really the worst if they cannot prove it. So what I think that we should first try to understand what exactly is the verdict and what are the things that's happening between these two countries. I'm sure our government and Delhi and the MEA, they have been trying to get some sort of proper documentation, and they are working on finding a solution, but so far they are
Mr. Daudi, from what I did understand from what you're trying to say is that this will act as some sort of a problem as far as the Qatar-India relationship is concerned, this judgment of death penalty against 8 ex-Indian Navy officials, that this will sour the relationship?
I think, when you look at the word, it says, India says that we are shocked. It means that they expected something better and they are working on this. And when they are shocked, it means that there could be some sort of, relationship will be shaken. I'm sure about that. But the kind of relation that India shares with most of the Arab countries, especially with Qatar, more than 20%, 22% Indians live there, and we have trade and business as well. So here, Qatar also is aware that if they do something of this sort, where they can be the reasons of tarnishing the relations between these two countries, this is not good for the interest of that nation as well.
Okay. So that's what I wanted to clarify, that you do feel that on both sides there will be sensitivity as far as dealing with this matter. So far, the reports suggest to us, and I do add that caveat, that even the Indian ministry is being very cagey about talking about this issue beyond a certain point. So let me go across to Ashok Sajanhar. What do you read in the MEA's response, first of all, before I get to the Indian-Qatar relationship issue and what India can do diplomatically? What do you read in the MEA's statement?
Obviously, as first of all, thank you very much, Shivani, for having me on your show.
Pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you. As your other panelists have said, I think this judgment that has come from the court of first instance in Qatar, it seems to have been very unexpected, because I remember having watched what the official spokesperson of the ministry said just a few days ago, that, our ambassador and deputy ambassador, deputy chief of mission have met the 8 officers in prison, and on the 1st of this month, and on the 3rd of this month was the 7th and the last hearing, and then we are expecting a judgment any time. And then it was, there was an air of hope and expectation that the verdict would be positive and, would be helpful as far as these officers are concerned. So obviously, what has come has, as the ministry has described it, it is shocked. The government of India is shocked, and it is something that we did not expect. So, the second part that I would like to, flowing from your comments and the comments of the two panelists also is that there is not much information that is available that's in the public domain. I'm not very certain whether the government of India is also not being, some of this information has not been shared with the government of India. I think, when the Minister of External Affairs says that I would not like to say much more on it because, it's confidential, or if the statement says that we don't want to speak much about it because it is confidential, then it does appear as if the government and the ministry is definitely aware definitely
Yeah,
more than what
absolutely.
is
They seem to
available in
know
the
more
public
than what
domain.
they're letting on. That's a given, absolute given, and they're also dealing with this matter with great sensitivity. So let me come to the other big question that most of our viewers would want to know, Ashok Sajjanhar. What is it truly diplomatically that India can do in such a scenario? Is there even a last case scenario where you can do some sort of a exchange? If it comes to that, is it going to be limited to provided legal, consular access and aid? Ultimately, we don't know which way the verdicts will go. Of course, they can appeal this verdict in a higher court. How do you see this at different stages?
Shivani, I think we'll have to approach this question on different simultaneously. One is, as the government has said, we'll study this judgment that it has come. We will appeal against it. We will take it to, after all, this is, as you mentioned yourself, this is the court of first instance. And, we have other possibilities of going in appeal to a different court, etc. Then, of course, the economic relations between the two countries, Qatar and India, are also very strong. We are very significant importers of gas from Qatar, and Qatar is one of the largest producers of gas. Of course, we know that once the Russian gas has gone out of the international market, there is a huge premium as far as gas is concerned, and they must be having a lot of buyers. But then India is one of the very large and significant purchasers of natural gas from Qatar, and that definitely works both ways, because if we are dependent on that, Qatar is also dependent on India for being a regular and a long-term customer. So I think that is also a relationship which we can leverage to our advantage. The last point here, in all these countries, since I have served in many of these countries in the Middle East, and the last court of appeal really is the head of state, which in this case is the Emir of Qatar. And the Emir of Qatar can definitely, on the basis of political considerations, can pardon, such sentences, normally which are done on the national day of the country, which is in December this year. So I think that what I'm suggesting is that all these tracks we'll have to work on them
Simultaneously. No, so what you're suggesting also is, interestingly, that even if the legal case doesn't go quite the way that India would like it to go, where let's say the death sentence is commuted or lowered, or so far even not even bail was being given to these 8 ex-Navy officials, we can still hope to get maybe some of the a state intervention to release them, to pardon them, and to be able to bring them back home after sentence served or something like that. So that's an interesting aspect. And I'll come back to you, Ashok Sajjanhar. Let me also go across to Amitabh Sinha, who's a senior lawyer joining us. Amitabh Sinha, for you, what do you think are the legal options for India if, let's say, you exhaust all the options in Qatar? We've seen in Kulbhushan Jadhav's case, for example, we have gone to the International Court of Justice. Could India look at those options? When do those options come into play, and how do they work?
Thank you, Shivani, for giving me a chance. But simultaneously, you have limited my scope only for the legal.
So you can make your other comments as well. I'm nobody to limit your scope. But if you could answer my question, then you can add your comments as well.
Yeah. No. So both are interlinked. Number one. See, Qatar is basically, in my eyes, it is a rogue country. And what Mr. Ashok ji or Mr. Swati, they are thinking, and I really appreciate Mr. Ashok's, approach towards the entire crisis. But Qatar is basically a fundamentalist Islamic country, which has Sharia law. And in Sharia law, they have announced it. It is not something which is hidden, that anybody who violates Sharia law, will be punished, whether it is a national, Qatari national, or international citizen. So they have done nothing which is new. My point is that if they have done in such a blatant manner, and I think my fellow colleague, panelist, he was saying that Qatar and India has very friendly relations. I don't disagree with that, but it is a one-way traffic. See, Qatar is basically an Islamic country, and Nupur Sharma case you have very rightly commented. But simultaneously, in FIFA World Cup, they have allowed or invited Zakir Naik, who is basically an anti-India and a fundamentalist person. And so after the protest, you forward most likely. So Qatar has shown its color in a very clear manner. And the most important thing, that Qatar is basically now den for all the terrorist organizations, including Hamas. So because of that, only 18th of October, only few days back, US has sanctioned, announced sanction against Qatar just to violate, because they have violated, Gulf Cooperation Council terms and conditions. So this important thing should be kept in mind before taking any conclusion.
No, I'm not really drawing any conclusions. I do welcome the comment that you made on Qatar, but actually that fundamentally complicates the situation, because in this case, we do want some sort of a favorable response from Qatar. I'm not discounting anything that you're saying.
It is really a complicated situation. See, they are trying to twist the arm of India, and through India they are trying to persuade, like all democratic world of the world, like America and all this, league, which is supporting Israel's righteous.
So you're saying, contrary to what some of our other guests are saying, you're saying this is very much connected to India's stance on Israel, India's friendship with US and the Western world, and the Israel-Gaza conflict.
And US sanctioned on 18th of October. In my point of view, 18th October they have sanctioned. Imposed sanction upon Qatar because of relationship with Hamas. And now this verdict. So this is basically arm twisting. So in my point of view, Qatar should be handled with firm iron hands. Number one, International Court of Justice is an option. But my point is that in the relationship between Qatar and India, Qatar cannot demand, because we are the largest population country and the highest growing economy. So our consumption of Qatar produce is more beneficial for Qatar. That's why my point is that there should not be any, soft handling of this,
I understand that. And let me take that to Swasti as well. Swasti, I think what he's hinting at.
They are habitual in passing great sentences. During the FIFA World Cup, they had passed order for British nationals for, death sentence. So this is basically their typical fundamentalist Islamic Sharia law country, and they have made it very open. And lastly, I just want to suggest that the advisory should be issued against Qatar. Any Indian, if the Indians are visiting Qatar, there should be advisory that this point the entire arrangement or entire effort should be like at their own risk. So this is my point of view.
Understand. Swasti, I do want you to weigh in on this. For those who may feel that this can be used as some sort of back-channel effort to get India to backtrack a little bit on its support or vociferous vocal support to Israel, and through India, as Mr. Amitabh Sinha seems to suspect, other countries as well. Do you anticipate that India is going to let those two issues collide in this case? Do you think the Indian diplomacy is going to be firm enough that the two cases are separate and they're not going to compromise their stand on any other issue in this case?
But Shivani, I think India has already shown a considerable maturity when it came to the West Asian crisis right now. Because let's try to look at it through other dimensions. I mean, there is not just the fact that India has stood by the two-state solution to Israel and Palestine, and India has condemned the Hamas attacks like so many other countries, including the Italian. I mean, come on, you come to think of it. I mean, if you remember, I think Italian Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni actually went all the way to meet Netanyahu and express a solidarity. And it is an Italian firm, which is Francateri, that is actually making all these submarines for them, which are extremely stealth and secretive, and they have an entire history. That is what I was trying to indicate at in my first set of remarks, that you really need to understand as to what is the nature of this program that that we are discussing right away. It is not just anything and they picked it up somewhere like a low-hanging fruit to kind of ramp up pressure on India. Because going by that, I think the first thing they should do is that they should do something against Italy, or maybe some kind of an indirect thing towards those countries. So I am not very convinced that this is to ramp up some sort of a pressure, because I think
Can I just add one more thing? Maybe in the Nupur Sharma case, there was criticism of the Indian government. I wouldn't use the word capitulate, although some would, but there was criticism that we succumbed to the pressure on a matter which was not that big, and issued an apology, etc., predominantly on Qatar's behest or because of Qatari pressure. So there's a precedent to this, and some people may use that to say that, okay, they've got a taste of this once, and who's to say they will not try this again?
So, see, Shivani, like I said, that since we do not have enough information to discuss the different threats that are there, I think all we are doing is speculating. I honestly would not be able to reject or accept a theory based on purely speculation. Well, I mean, if you ask me, there could be a possibility.
You are following the speculations when you are talking about the Italian submarines and all. What you are talking about? You are in one hand you are talking about speculation. In other hand you are not talking about the speculation.
Okay, I understand. Amitabh Sir, let us finish very quickly. I'll come to you, Mr. Dawoodi. Just please be patient for a minute. Yes, Swasti, finish, please.
Yeah. So basically, I think the only point that I'm trying to make is that apart from all the emotional appeals, like I said, that it is absolutely horrendous, the way these people have been picked up, and these are officers. And of course, I think India is going to take the strongest possible measure. They are first going to, we don't know the details yet, but I guess there is a way to first appeal within the judicial system in Qatar, and if they are not followed properly, you can go to International Court of Justice, but nothing is going to help as much as the back channel diplomacy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What I think the Indian government is doing. So
that is exactly where the Indian government or the present dispensation led by Narendra Modi and S. Shankar has been very successful too, especially in the Middle East as well. But once again, I just want to quickly go across to Ashok Sajjanha to understand this, sir, because you have served in some of these countries. Now, their courts, Amitabh Sinha obviously has a point when he talks about Islamic Sharia law and the way that they treat certain issues versus how the rest of the world may treat. That's a separate issue. But some of these courts in countries like Qatar can be very opaque. It's a very opaque functioning, and you don't really know, where to get the proper information or how to get the proper information, or whether you will even get all the details. Could you just elaborate a little bit about the functioning of the courts there? Ashok Sajjanhar. Mr. Sajjanhar, can you hear me? It looks like we've lost...
In Sharia law, there is no scope for any type of consideration. What they think is right. So if somebody is expecting something, liberal will come from their Sharia law courts, I think it is improper. And
no, I'm not quite asking for something liberal. Let's not confuse liberal, modern, Western here. I'm just saying, what are their laws really? What is the scope as far as their legal system is concerned is all that we can look for.
I should intervene.
They will only listen to the pressure.
You should allow me to
Okay,
speak,
yes, Mr. Dawoodi, please go ahead. Could you answer that question?
Let me,
is the functioning of courts in some of these countries too opaque to get a real sense of justice? Mr. Dawoodi.
Look, I tell you about this. I've been here in this region for 22 years, and I am aware of a few things about Sharia law. I don't want to comment much on that, but just one thing I want to highlight here. When someone talks about Sharia law, and when he says that there is no scope of anything, there is one thing, that is forgiveness. Okay, they give permission to them. If someone who wants to forgive someone, it's finished. The case ends there. Now, that's not my point.
No, but
My
sir,
point here
a case
is,
like espionage where you have foreign nationals involved cannot be just decided on that. What I'm trying to understand is what is the
that's why I'm
process of
saying when
putting in
you
a prosecution versus a defense? What is the defense allowed to any individual, Qatari or otherwise, when they are implicated in a case like this? That's the sense that I'm trying to get. We'll try and get Mr. Ashok Sajjanar also. Sir, stay with me for a few minutes. Let Mr. Daudi finish. Yes. Mr. Daudi, go ahead.
yeah. So what I was saying, like, one point that I want to mention here, when someone, especially you say that someone is a lawyer, for example, Mr. Sinha, co-panelist, is here, and he wants to believe mostly in speculations. Okay.
No, so
The
forget
merit
that.
of
Answer my
case-
question. I have limited time. Mr. Daudi, answer my question. What is the defense allowed to individuals, in this case, the ex-Navy officials from India, to present their case? Is a defense allowed?
Yes, these things are allowed everywhere. It's like every other country. When you have courts there in India, you have courts there in the Middle Eastern countries, they have their lawyers, and here we have consular access as well. So I think in general, I don't know anything in particular about this case in particular, but
Why they
generally...
will
Mr. Sinha, not like this. Mr. Sinha, not like this, please. Yes, Mr. Daudi.
Look, in general, when there are hearings, they are given proper space, and the lawyers, they defend their case, and it's something like, what we have in India and other countries. So we should not mix this up with the system where we say that it's Sharia, and there we have democracy, we have this on that. The general perspective and the general principle concept is the same.
The general concept is the same. Well, that's all that one can hope for, that there should be access to both legal proceedings and judicial proceedings, and there should be a semblance of justice where you can present your case, the best defense possible for your case. I'm not sure if Ashok Sajjanar is back with us, but seemingly he's facing some video issues. We can actually, if the video is not clear, it's okay, let's just keep his audio on. Ashok Sajjanar, the question I was trying to understand from you, the answer was, the question is, how opaque or how easy, how transparent is the functioning of courts and the legal system in some of these countries?
It is not transparent at all, Shivani. I think most of the cases, and particularly, this one, which is to deal with
national security.
National security, espionage, etc. Then, it's going to be very, very opaque. There's hardly going to be any information that is going to be available. That's why you would have seen that, we asked for bail for our officers and the sailor. Bail was not granted. They were even put in solitary confinement. And you mentioned yourself that the Omanian officer who was, heading this Al-Dhara company, he was let off after 2 months, but they have been in custody from 30th of August last year, and they have now been pronounced this judgment of death penalty.
Death penalty, yes.
So, so to come to your question, it is very opaque, and really it is, not like the what we have in the Indian Penal Code and the Criminal Code, etc., etc.
So there could be a difficulty in getting a true sense of justice, is my question. And therefore, we will have to depend more on diplomacy and not just on legalities, isn't it?
Yeah, more on diplomacy and on the political connections, because that is what really works in these countries, because it is, all power rests in the top leadership. That is the fount of all power and all authority. And I have been in some of these, absolutely centrally administered countries, and ministers don't count for anything. Their institutions are very fragile, very vulnerable, very weak. They don't really, whether it is the Election Commission or the Supreme Court or any of these matters, they don't really have much authority or much power. All power rests in the, in the chief executive, which in the case is Emir. And that is why I had mentioned that, if we really want to get positive results as far as we are concerned, we continue to work on the other aspects also. Like Mr. Sinha said, ICJ, we explore all the legal provisions also, the legal possibilities also.
Okay.
But ultimately, what I feel is it is approach to the Emir and
Yeah,
to
so,
the highest
so it's
office.
important to understand what you're dealing with. That's what I was trying to understand. What is this? What is a country that we're dealing with? What is a system that we're dealing with? And therefore, you have to come at the best options in front of you. And in this case, as our guests are explaining, it could well be back-channel diplomacy and not much more than that. And therefore, the suspicion arises whether this could be used as some sort of arm twisting. And of course, there's not much we can say on that because there's nothing really out in the open. But we do hope that there is some success, some breakthrough achieved as far as this case is concerned. I do thank all of our guests for joining us. Moving on, let's get you a quick update of the Israel-Gaza situation. The United States of America conducted airstrikes in Syria targeting Iranian proxy facilities. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin claimed that the strikes were for self-defense and were in response to a series of ongoing and mostly unsuccessful attacks against them in Iraq and Syria by Iranian-backed militia groups. The U.S. further warned Irani proxies that if the attacks by them continue, the US will not hesitate to take further necessary measures to protect its people. Meanwhile, in Israel's war against Hamas, the IDF carried out a limited raid in the Gaza Strip, striking Hamas operatives and sites.
We are raining hellfire on Hamas. We've already killed thousands of terrorists, and this is only the beginning. Simultaneously, we are preparing for a ground invasion. I will not elaborate on when, how, or how many. I will also not elaborate on the various calculations we're making, which the public is mostly unaware of, and that is how things should be.
Governs the Gaza Strip stores fuel, both diesel fuel and other types of and benzene and other types of fuel. It's all inside the Gaza Strip, and there's enough for many days for hospitals and water pumps to run. Only the priorities are different. Hamas prefers to have all of the fuel for its warfighting capabilities, leaving civilians without it.
Time for us to slip into a very short break. On the other side, we are shifting gears. An exclusive conversation coming up with British High Commissioner Alex Ellis on the India versus England World Cup match, which is scheduled for Sunday.
Hello, Moto.
A stronghold, and they have been backed by USA in many ways. Then there are presence of Islamic groups, ISIS as well. We have seen USA and other nations fighting against the ISIS. At peak of ISIS, it has captured swath of Iraq and Syrian land. Then there are international involvement also. Sometimes Turkey government also gets involved. We have recently seen Israeli government striking Aleppo airport. Major cities in Yemen have been attacked by these countries. So the situation in Syria always remains very fluid in the last 1 decade, at least since the launch or since the beginning of the civil war that has started in Syria. But with the latest the latest strike of US forces into that region, it will remain to be seen whether this is going ahead towards a full-fledged escalation where the countries like Iran, Syria, Russia, and the other country present in the Middle East region could also get dragged into this conflict, or this is just a preparedness from the USA side, as it has said, and a deterrent in the region that will ensure that the wars does not escalate to a full-fledged conflict, and the situation remains where it is right now. US missiles have targeted some eastern part of Syria, which were used by Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces, and this is the latest that is happening in Syria, and the US military forces have termed these missile attacks as a way of self-defense, and they were conducted at two facilities in eastern Syria where the Iranian IRGC, the Iranian guards, are using these facilities to support Syria's government right now. And this is also happening in the wake of in the last 1.5 weeks several attacks have happened on US forces, present in the area, and with the latest escalation that one can witness in happening in Middle East, USA is also trying to send about 900 US troops that will be deployed in CENTCOM, and they are not going to Israel, by the way. And 16 attacks that USA has faced in Iraq and Syria in the last 10 days or 10 to 15 days has been a reason why USA is deploying another warship also in the region, sending about 900 troops, sending THAAD batteries, patriotic missiles, and other weaponries that could not only defend US forces in the region but also can provide a deterrence in the region. That is what US government has been saying. Meanwhile, the situation in Syria and in Middle East remains very fluid. There have been multiple attacks on US forces in the last few days, and in one of those attacks about 21 US personnel were injured also, and these responses that USA have been doing, our US side has saying that these are because of the escalation from the Iranian proxies in the region. Secretary of Defense Austin Lloyd has said that US Eisenhower and THAAD battery and additional Patriot BNS to the CENTCOM region are being readied, and this was about 4 days ago, and now USA has finally sent about 900 troops, THAAD battery missiles and Patriot missiles, and another warship in that region. And USA has said that this will bolster the US presence, strengthen their military bases in the region. It will also create a deterrence against US.
Welcome back. This Sunday, India takes on England in the World Cup, a match that would have otherwise been seen as one of the top billed clashes, but for England's lackluster show in the event so far. Can England do the unthinkable, and will the law of averages catch up with India, who've been unbeatable so far? I spoke to cricket buff, the British High Commissioner to India, Alex Ellis, on this and more. India has been performing superbly in the World Cup, and up now is England, who've been having a completely opposite tournament. To talk a little bit more about the India-England clash in Lucknow, it's my pleasure to have none other than the British High Commissioner to India, Alex Ellis. Alex, I wish we were talking in better circumstances, and I wish there was more to celebrate of the English performance in the World Cup.
They're good circumstances for India, not so for England, who are out of form at the moment, that's clear. So I'm a little bit nervous about the game on Sunday because usually England-India is a very tight game, can go either way, but at the moment India look in much better shape than England.
I'll come to the English performance in just a bit, but mathematically, England are not out of the competition.
Correct. And
so let's look at the positives.
This is the country of genius mathematicians. I ask for the help of those genius mathematicians to find a way for England to get through and get to the semi-finals. But they do look very out of form. I watched the game in Ahmedabad against New Zealand. I watched them in Delhi, here in Delhi, against Afghanistan, and the batsmen in particular look a lot out of form.
Yeah. But given that they're not technically out of the tournament, there is still a lot to play for, especially against the host India, who, as you said, are looking absolutely great, and anybody would say this is the team to beat and is so far unbeatable. What do you make of the challenge that England faces, particularly for this match?
Well, it's going to be a very partisan crowd, very intense, very supporting India, as you would expect. And there isn't so much pressure on India at the moment, I would say. The question for India, I guess, is I'm sure they will get to the semi-finals. There'll be a lot of pressure. They did it in 2011 when they were the hosts, so they would be the team to beat. South Africa looked very strong. I mean, they absolutely destroyed England bowling in Mumbai this week. New Zealand that was a tight game. New Zealand-India, I thought India did very well to win that one as well. So we'll see. But England, maybe we're playing for pride, but we should have pride. And there are some great players in that team. It's just not quite clicking.
What did you make of the Indian batting so far? I mean, this is a batting lineup that is dominating the charts as far as the World Cup is concerned.
Yeah, it is.
And, there were so many expectations from the likes of Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, greats of the game in their own right. And even others are continually stepping up.
They are. I mean, Rohit Sharma, I saw him when I first arrived, actually. I went to watch India play England in Chennai when Rohit Sharma scored a very good century. He looks extremely good. They're very good players. And there's also tremendous depth in the squad. I mean, you look at what the IPL has done in terms of drawing in people from all over the place. But I do think they have a massive advantage from having Jasprit Bumrah back and fit. His fitness is important, I think, because he has the X factor. Shami bowled very well the other evening as well. But I think that Bumrah staying fit, that's important. India spinners are doing well as well.
Yeah.
Actually, haven't been playing R. Ashwin all the time. I'm a bit of a fan of R. Ashwin. I think he's a fine bowler, but you see the strength and depth which India has, so that it can afford to leave out a player like that.
Even Hardik Pandya actually was ruled out of an injury, and India didn't really miss him as much as we suspected they will.
You're absolutely right, because I saw him when Gujarat Titans beat the Rajasthan Royals in the IPL final. I was in Ahmedabad for that, and I don't want you to think that I give bad luck to all the teams that I watch, but he was superb in that game. Actually, a very good captain too, I thought, of the Gujarat Titans. But you're right, no one's really noticed it. The team has kept going very nicely.
You mentioned a lot of these matches that you have seen all around India. So tell me a little bit more about your love for cricket.
Very sadly, at the age of 7, I had to accept I might not play for England.
At the age of 7 itself?
Yeah, although, 50 years later, almost 50 years later, looking at the way the England's batting at the moment, I'm prepared to offer myself and see what happens. No, I think I love the game. I went to see the first World Cup final, 1975. West Indies beat Australia in the final, an amazing game. I remember vividly Clive Lloyd scoring a century. I was at Lord's in 1983 when India beat West Indies. Again, a match I'll never forget. Most vivid impressions on my mind of the Viv Richards popping the ball out towards the grandstand and Kapil Dev taking a great catch. I also remember the fans running onto the pitch at the end. There's kind of complete anarchy.
Yes, and the players running off to themselves.
Complete disbelief that this was happening. It was an amazing event. And so obviously when I came here, first thing I did was get myself down to the Chupak to watch England play India. I still play. I think we got our first match of the season next week. That's not for England, that's for the British High Commission team. And I love it. I've always loved it. It's a great game.
So what do you do on the field?
Well, not much now, Shivani, if I can be honest. I open the batting. My first words of Hindi I learnt were to my opening partner, do TK teen nahi. The limits on my running between the wickets are definitely there. But I really shouldn't bowl ever again, Shivani. After the last time I bowled, I think that's probably the end for me in bowling.
But do tell me, I mean, you've been here quite a bit. You've spent a lot of time in India in a previous avatar as well.
Yeah.
What do you make of India's love for cricket, and how does it bring back any memories for you as an Englishman? Because this is a sport that both countries truly love.
They do. I completely agree with you. And India has this fantastic history and tradition of cricket from the late 19th century, starting in Mumbai, I guess, but then spreading around the country. And it's just something we share between the two countries, this complete obsession about this very weird game. I mean, I took an American friend along on Wednesday. We went to watch Australia-Netherlands, saw Glenn Maxwell score the fastest, I think the fastest ever 100 in a World Cup, 40 balls, including a reverse hook, which is just something, I don't think I'll ever see a shot like that again. I'm certainly not going to try and play it. I took the Portuguese ambassador, the ambassador of Portugal, to see an IPL game earlier this year. And you realise what a weird game it is.
It's tough to explain to people who don't watch it, isn't it?
Yeah, even when they watch it. My German colleague, I was watching an IPL game, and he said, they don't do very much, do they? Because a lot of standing around. But it's just something magically attractive about it. And I love watching it here because crowds here get very involved with the game. When you're watching England, Afghanistan, although it was painful, the crowd was really getting into the match and obviously supporting the Afghan bowlers, Rashid Khan in particular, who was bowling beautifully. So it's just fun. It's a great experience being at a game here. I mean, it's a great experience being at a game in the UK, and I love watching cricket in the UK, but somehow playing and watching here is just that little bit different. So we'll have the men's test series coming out in January. We'll have the women's team over, who are very strong at the moment, the England women's team. They're coming over in December, I think. So it's a great opportunity to watch more of this.
Absolutely. So you will be traveling a lot around India during that time as well.
Shivani, unbelievably, my job requires me to go and watch cricket sometimes.
Okay. But tell me, put on your cricket thinking hat and tell me, what do you think is going wrong for this English team? Because, you mentioned about the batsmen particularly not clicking. You had the return of Ben Stokes. Doesn't seem to have really benefited England.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all trying to find their form. I watched Butler, who's the most beautiful player, magnificent player, and I watched him in the IPL, just played like a dream. And I was actually at the 2019 World Cup final. I was at the game as well, where he batted better than anyone else. But somehow the timing's not quite right. And once you lose confidence, I think as a collective, it's really tough to deal with. You build it over a long period of time, and it can go very fast. We haven't been able to control the run rates, particularly in the power plays. Bowlers haven't been tight enough. I think We missed Liam Plunkett, actually, who was a very effective middle overs bowler. Adil Rashid is still bowling well. He has lovely control, beautiful bowler. But they're just not performing. And, it's really tough, I must say, because, my job, I have a bad day, not many people notice it. If you're an international cricketer, you have a bad day, the world notices it and then comments on it. And I think that must be mentally very tough as well. But we'll see. There is always hope, and so we'll see.
No, the format of the World Cup is such that it's a pretty long group stage. You're playing 9 matches against all the other teams. So, a lot of the teams are still not very out, England included. If you were to talk to the team, I mean, you travel so much, I'm sure you've had some interactions with the English team, but if you were to get an opportunity to talk to them, let's say before the next match, what are you going to tell them?
They would be really desperate if they were asking for my advice, I think.
Well, sometimes in these situations, you'll take anything you get.
I think you have to go back to being yourself. Sometimes you can lose confidence. We can all lose confidence and lose a bit of direction. And you just have to remind yourself of your 21-year-old talented self and all that brilliance which you have, and try to go back into the state of being yourself. One of the things I really like about the way that England are playing Test cricket, and they're playing beautifully over the last year and a half, they've just been wonderful to watch, is that they back themselves and they just allow themselves to be themselves. They've managed to create an atmosphere in which they're very aggressive. I think they've learned over time, I watched them in the Ashes, learned how to just temper that a little bit, but they back themselves. And I just think it's a very hard thing to do, but sometimes you have to trust in your own talent because they are wonderfully talented players.
But that baseball approach in Test cricket isn't quite, working as far as limited overs cricket is concerned, is it?
I'm not sure it's the problem is a lack of, too much aggression, actually. I think that, for about 6 or 7 years, England, because remember they're the world champions at 50 over and at 20 over. Yes. They won the T20 Cup, World Cup last year. They played this very aggressive style where batting very hard, going at the runs very hard, but somehow it just hasn't happened. I watched in Ahmedabad, actually, the second ball of the whole World Cup. Johnny Bairstow hit it for 6. Beautiful little flick off his legs. And you thought, yes. But they just haven't been able to come through. And Milan batted very well against Bangladesh, and he's been a form player for England, so I thought that's going to be good. Brook actually played, I thought, very well against Afghanistan. He was a bit of a standout player. In fact, he's a standout player overall. But just collectively, it hasn't come together. Yes. And that happens.
It happens. There's still time for the English fans like yourself to maybe savor a little bit better cricket from them because, as I said, the tournament is a long one, the format is a long one. Yeah. Fortunes can still be changed. We will, of course, hope, or at least Indian fans will hope it doesn't happen against India, even though we've been worried that maybe the law of averages will catch up with India too, and there is a hiccup, round the corner.
They usually, at some point, every team has a hiccup. The regression to the mean is a very powerful thing in maths and in life. But actually, I think that the Indian team, they do look very strong. Yeah. They look confident. They look like they have purpose. They have got a settled side. They know where they're going. And that, I think, England have just lost a bit that sense of purpose and that sense of being a settled side with clear thinking.
Our audiences would like to know you, since you're such a cricket buff, you played cricket yourself. Who's your favorite Indian cricketer? Current, former, any generation?
So the first Indian person I was ever aware of seeing was Bishan Singh Bedi when I must have been 8 years old. I saw him play in a final at Lord's, I think in 1976. And what a great introduction to India. I think of him because, of course, he passed away very recently. He had this very unusual combination of grace, of power, and he was brave as well. When he get hit for 6, he didn't just bowl a flat one straight away. He would just sort of toss it up a little bit high, try and play the batsman sucker the batsman into getting out. And so I loved watching him play as a kid. Obviously, I watched Gavaskar play a lot as a kid. I remember him batting against England, almost breaking every world record in terms of a run chase. Now, they're fantastic players. I must say, I love watching Bumrah bowl. I think he brings something very different and very, very exciting.
Okay, let me ask Alex a little bit about his coming up trip to Lucknow. But I'm going to throw this question in Hindi to you because your Hindi is also something a lot of people in India have come to enjoy. तो सबसे पहले आप मुझे ये बताइए कि आप लखनऊ में जाके क्या खाना पसंद करेंगे?
सब लखनऊ का खाना सब खाना में पसंद है क्योंकि मुझे पसंद है क्योंकि ये बिरयानी बहुत स्वादिष्ट है और all those lovely desserts. लेकिन आजकल मैं नहीं बहुत खाना खाऊंगा क्योंकि मैं You reach a time where you can't eat quite so many desserts as you used
आप
to.
डाइटिंग कर रहे हैं?
Dieting nahi, lekin cautious cautious हूँ.
Okay. One more thing I do have to ask you. Since we're talking cricket and you're going to be in Lucknow to cheer the English team, and all the very best to them and to you. कुछ इंग्लिश टीम के लिए हमारे दर्शकों के थ्रू कुछ बोलना चाहेंगे, उनको कुछ मैसेज देना चाहेंगे?
मेरा मैसेज सब how do you say player? Killer. Or may the best team win. Let's hope that's England.
Okay, so let me put it this way. क्या आपको लगता है कि इंग्लैंड भारत को हरा पाएगी संडे के मैच में?
इस सवाल का जवाब नहीं करूँगा.
इस सवाल का जवाब वाकई में मुश्किल है.
बहुत मुश्किल है, इसलिए मैं डिप्लोमेट हूँ, इसलिए उच्चायुक्त हूँ, इसलिए.
All right, a diplomatic answer there from Alex Ellis. But Alex, it was a pleasure speaking to you, and it's great to be sharing this love of cricket on Kings of Cricket.
Thank you very much.
Our World Cup special. Thanks a lot for speaking to us, and let's hope the best team wins.
Thanks very much, Shivani.
I'm getting someone to
and deterring a full-scale conflict, and at the same time it will also provide an additional support to Israel in case of need. USA had earlier last week also USA had shot down a missile in the Red Sea which was launched from Yemen towards USA. There were certain troops who were injured. US Navy has said that Houthi rebels had launched that missile in the Red Sea, where USA tried to shoot it down. And also in the last few days, what USA has been continuously telling the world that it doesn't want the war between Israel and other nations to escalate into full-fledged conflict in the region. But at the same time, US is preparing all possibilities. Many warships have been sent into the region. High-quality guided precision missiles were sent to the region, and there is a preparedness for any eventuality that US forces might see in that region. Meanwhile, Syrian war continues to go on. There are multiple factions in Syria who have been supported by many countries, including USA, Russia, Iran. We have seen USA siding along with the rebel forces. Then Russia and Iran are backing the al-Assad regime. So there are certain geographies which is controlled by the rebel forces. Then there are certain geographies controlled by the Assad forces, and these geographies keep changing with the ongoing war. Sometimes some faction take advantage of the situation. But then there are rebel factions, and there are numerous of them. We have seen some of which they have been receiving varying degree of support from various countries present in the region. Kurdish forces, they are also one of the stronghold, and they have been backed by USA in many ways. Then there are presence of Islamic groups, ISIS as well. We have seen USA and other nations fighting against the ISIS. At peak of ISIS, it has captured swath of Iraq and Syrian land. Then there are international involvement also. Sometimes Turkey government also gets involved. We have recently seen Israeli government striking Aleppo airport. Major cities in Yemen have been attacked by these countries. So the situation in Syria always remains very fluid in the last 1 decade, at least since the launch or since the beginning of the civil war that has started in Syria. But with the latest the latest strike of US forces into that region, it will remain to be seen whether this is going ahead towards a full-fledged escalation, where the countries like Iran, Syria, Russia, and the other country present in the Middle East region could also get dragged into this conflict, or this is just a preparedness from the USA side, as it has said, and a deterrent in the region that will ensure that the wars does not escalate to a full-fledged conflict, and the situation remains where it is right now. US missiles have targeted some eastern part of Syria, which were used by Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces, and this is the latest that is happening in Syria, and the US military forces have termed these missile attacks as a way of self-defense, and they were conducted at two facilities in eastern Syria, where the Iranian IRGC, the Iranian guards, are using these facilities to support Syria's government right now.
Viewers, 8 Indian lives are hanging in the balance in Qatar. This after a court in Doha found these individuals guilty of allegedly spying for Israel. Within moments of the news breaking, shocking Indian geopolitical analysts began questioning Doha's motives. Were the 8 ex-Navy men paying the price for the Modi government standing in solidarity with Israel? Qatar, as is well known, is home to the Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh, as well as its former leader Khalid Mashal. But before we get to these questions, let's first update you with the sketchy